He got expelled for being too smart and too poor. But when a billionaire lands in a helicopter to fight back, this small-town scandal just turned into a national reckoning. Watch now. Jaylen Brooks' worn-out backpack hit the tile hallway floor with a heavy thud, echoing to the cold October afternoon air at Northbridge High School in Kentucky. But that sound was nothing compared to the weight crushing his chest. He had just been expelled, not for breaking rules, not for failing grades, but simply because of the color of his skin and the poverty he was born into. The sharp, stinging words of Principal Donald Whitaker, a middle-aged man with slick silver hair and eyes as cold and gray as steel, still echoed in Jaylen's mind. This school is for students from respectable families. We don't have space for someone like you. Jaylen stood frozen in the hallway, feeling as if the entire world was crumbling at his feet. Students passing by stole glances at him, eyes full of judgment. Some smirked. A few even giggled. The feeling of being treated like trash, like a stain no one wanted to acknowledge, tightened in his chest like a vice. He forced back tears, refusing to fall apart in the very place he once believed was his dream. But his trembling hands betrayed him, clinging tightly to the backpack straps like it was the last solid thing to hold on to in a storm. What did I do wrong besides trying? The question kept looping in Jaylen's head, every word slicing deeper. His steps were heavy as he walked, each footfall sinking into humiliation, into the weight of every sneer and every whispered insult. In the distance, the school gate slowly creaked open, not welcoming, but pushing him out of a world of privilege he was never truly allowed to enter. But deep down, beneath the tears that hadn't yet fallen, a silent vow stirred in his chest. One day, they'll regret underestimating me. That morning, the halls of Northbridge High were eerily quiet, as if the air itself was holding its breath before a coming storm. Jaylen Brooks, a 16-year-old black teen with deep, searching eyes and a frayed jacket, stood outside the principal's office, hands sweating and clenched tight around his backpack straps, clinging to one last shred of hope. The door swung open. Jaylen Brooks. Principal Whitaker's voice rang out, cold, detached, like a knock from fate itself. He stood there, straight-backed, his shirt perfectly pressed, silver-rimmed glasses catching the light. But it was his gaze that made Jaylen's spine go cold. The gaze of a man who didn't see people, only status. You know why I called you in today, don't you? Jaylen swallowed hard, his voice rough from trying to stay composed. No, sir, I don't. I've never broken the rules. I've always gotten good grades. Whitaker let out a small laugh, one without the warmth of humor. His eyes scanned Jaylen from head to toe, lingering on the torn shoes and faded shirt. Northbridge isn't the place for your kind. A ripple of whispers rose from the back of the hallway, where a few students had gathered to eavesdrop. In that moment, Jaylen felt his whole body tighten, as if someone had taken a swing straight at the pride he had spent years holding together. Sir, I believe students should be judged by their effort and character, not by where they come from or the color of their skin. His words rang clear, but they didn't slow Whitaker down. The principal only tilted his head slightly, eyes sharp as blades. Don't be arrogant, Jaylen. You don't belong here, and my decision is final. A loud laugh burst from the crowd, led by Travis Monroe, the spoiled rich kid who treated humiliation like a sport. Travis said loud enough for the whole hallway to hear. Finally got rid of that black country boy. Jaylen stood there, hands clenched so tightly his fingernails pressed into his palms. But he didn't crumble. He met Whitaker's eyes, not with hatred, but with a silent promise. One day, people like you won't have the power to judge others from behind your hollow pride. Jaylen walked out of the principal's office with his back straight, his eyes up, but his heart felt torn in two. He hadn't even reached the end of the hallway before that familiar voice called out again. Travis Monroe, with the same smug grin that always seemed ready to shred someone's dignity. Hey, black farm boy. Travis yelled down the hall. So they finally kicked you out, huh? Thought second-hand clothes and high grades would get you a seat at the table. His crew, the rich kids with slick back hair, spotless designer polos, and sneakers too clean to have ever touched real ground, burst into laughter. The hallway echoed with mock applause, snapping fingers, and whistles. One of them even pantomimed wiping down a chair like he was clearing away the smell of poverty. Jaylen's grip on his backpack tightened. His nails dug deep into his skin, but he didn't turn around. He knew, to them, the moment he reacted, he'd already lost. "Oh, look, he's shaking," Travis sneered, stepping closer. "You think you matter? This school doesn't need trash like you dirtying up the floors." Jaylen lifted his head, not to argue, but to look straight into Travis's face, bloated with cruel satisfaction. Jaylen's eyes didn't flinch. They were quiet, but burning. "You know what, Jay?" Travis whispered, leaning in close to his ear. "Your existence is a stain on Northbridge. Even the bathroom doors here look classier than those busted shoes you're wearing." His crew howled again, like they were front row at a private comedy show made just for them. Jaylen didn't say a word. He just walked past Travis, every step heavy with pain, but forged in resolve. Behind him, the laughter kept echoing, like bullets pinging in his mind. But inside him, another fire had started, one no one could see, one no one could put out. "You laughed today, but I'll be the one the whole world listens to tomorrow." Dusk had fallen by the time Jaylen Brooks stepped onto the dirt road that led to the small wooden house on the outskirts of Maple Hill, the place he and his family called home. The evening wind rustled to the cornfields, carrying the scent of earth and the familiar sounds of country life. Frogs croaking in the distance, leaves whispering in the breeze, and now, the heavy footsteps of a boy who had just been shoved out of the doorway of his dreams. On the front porch, Angela Brooks, a kind-hearted black woman whose eyes always held the warmth of sunlight, was hanging laundry. When she saw the silhouette of her son trudging down the path, she immediately stopped, her gaze shifting from calm to worried. "Jaylen, what happened?" "Your face." Carl Brooks, Jaylen's father, stepped out from behind the house, still holding his hoe from a long day at the farm. Beneath the sweat on his brow was a steady, weathered gaze, but it faltered the moment he saw his son's reddened eyes and the dusty backpack dragging behind him. Jaylen stood still for a few seconds. Then, like a dam breaking, he let his backpack fall to the porch and choked out the words. "I got expelled just for being a poor black kid who's too good at school in a place full of rich kids." The house fell silent, as if all the air had been sucked out of it. His mother covered her mouth, tears falling before she could even react. His father stepped forward and placed a firm hand on Jaylen's shoulder, gripping tightly. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said, his voice deep and steady, like a church bell echoing through the hills. Jaylen lowered his head. I let you both down." "No," his mother said, stepping in to wrap her arms around him. "The ones who should be ashamed are those who think skin color determines a person's worth." His father met Jaylen's eyes with unwavering strength. "Son, the poor don't get to choose their circumstances, but they always get to choose how they move forward. They can take away your school, but they can't take your dignity." And right then, in the arms of his family, Jaylen knew today's pain wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something stronger. That night, in the small attic room of the wooden house in Maple Hill, Jaylen Brooks lay on his creaky old bed, the moonlight slipping through the thin curtain and casting soft, broken light on the stained ceiling above. The wall clock ticked away, counting every heavy second. Outside, the crickets sang their endless melancholic tune. Jaylen stared at the ceiling, his chest heavy as if weighed down by stone. He had once believed that studying hard, being respectful, and trying every day would be enough. But the truth had landed like a slap to the face. To them, he was still just a black kid from a farm. No matter how smart he was, he'd never be worthy to stand beside the children of wealth. He sat up suddenly and pulled a small wooden box from his desk drawer. Inside were his most precious things. A family photo from the spring festival, his 9th grade honor roll certificate, and a folded scrap of paper, a promise he once wrote to himself. "One day, I'll stand on a big stage and speak about justice in front of thousands." Jaylen pressed his lips together, folded the note slowly, and whispered, "But where is justice when skin color and poverty decide a person's worth?" He got up and walked to the window, staring out at the fields bathed in moonlight. The wind swept through his hair like whispered voices from the earth itself. If only someone would stand up, someone brave enough to speak, for people like me. Jaylen took a deep breath and rested his forehead against the cold window frame. In his heart, a quiet wish began to form, not for revenge, but to be understood, for someone strong and powerful to finally speak the truth. A sudden gust of wind rushed into the room, lifting the promise note from the box and letting it flutter gently into Jaylen's open hand. He closed his fingers around it, and in the dark, his eyes began to shine. If no one else will stand up, then maybe I have to be the first. The next morning, the roar of a helicopter suddenly tore to the peaceful skies of Maple Hill. The steady thumping grew louder and louder, sending chickens behind the barn into a frantic panic. Jaylen Brooks jolted upright in bed, eyes wide. He dashed to the window and yanked the curtain aside like he was afraid he might still be dreaming. In the distance, right over the football field of Northbridge High, a sleek black helicopter, emblazoned with a gold letter K, was descending into a cloud of dust. Students poured out of their classrooms. Teachers rushed into the hallways, and everyone stared in disbelief. Inside the principal's office, Donald Whitaker yanked open the window curtain with shaking hands. His face turned pale, as if he'd just been struck by lightning. "No, it can't be," he muttered. The helicopter door opened. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, polished sunglasses gleaming under the morning sun. He walked with a presence that made the entire school courtyard fall silent. Students whispered, "Who is that? He looks like a movie star." "No, that's Malcolm Kingsley, the agriculture and real estate mogul, the billionaire." Whitaker stormed out of his office, drenched in nervous sweat. He shouted at the security guards, "Stop him! No one lands here without clearance." But the guards didn't move. They had seen the logo on the helicopter. Everyone in town knew Kingsley Industries, the company that had donated millions to Kentucky's infrastructure projects. Malcolm Kingsley didn't look at anyone. He strode directly to the center of the school grounds. Behind him, two assistants followed, briefcases in hand, wearing expressions as serious as if the FBI had just touched down. Then he stopped, took a breath, locked eyes with Principal Whitaker, who was visibly swallowing hard. "I'm not here to shake hands," Kingsley said, his voice calm and commanding. "I'm here to make things right. Something very serious has happened at this school." And from far away, standing in the window of the old wooden house, Jaylen was still watching. His heart thundered in his chest. He didn't know what was coming, but something deep inside told him life had just taken a sudden, irreversible turn. While the Northbridge campus remained stunned by the dramatic arrival, Jaylen Brooks stood still at his bedroom window, his eyes locked onto the glossy black helicopter with the golden K symbol. His heart pounded like it was trying to break free from his chest. "Jaylen, come down here now." His mother, Angela, called from the kitchen, her voice a mix of confusion and concern. Jaylen ran down the stairs to find his parents frozen in place at the front door, where a sleek black SUV had mysteriously appeared in the driveway. The car door opened, and a black man stepped out, dressed like he belonged in a documentary about the ultra-rich, with a calm, mysterious smile on his face. "Carl Brooks," the man said, his voice deep and steady, like the low boom of a jazz bass drum. Jaylen's father stiffened. Malcolm Kingsley?" He repeated the name like he'd just seen a ghost from his past. Jaylen looked from his father to the stranger, his mind spinning. "My boy," Kingsley said, walking toward Jaylen. "I'm here for you, and for a debt of honor I owe your father." Jaylen blinked. I don't understand." Kingsley turned to Jaylen's father, his eyes filled with emotion. "Carl saved my life, back when I was a field engineer on a farm project here. There was a terrible work accident. He carried me 10 miles through back roads to get me to the hospital in time. I swore I'd repay him, and today I'm keeping that promise." He turned back to Jaylen, eyes glowing. "I heard everything that happened at Northbridge. How they treated you, Travis Monroe, that arrogant excuse of a principal, and I'm not letting it slide." Jaylen stammered, still unable to fully believe what was happening. "Mr. Kingsley, I'm just a regular student." "No, Jaylen," Kingsley said, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "You're a voice for those no one ever listens to. And starting today, you're not standing alone anymore. Behind Kingsley, one of his assistants pulled out a thick stack of papers and raised it high, as if preparing to deliver a verdict. At that exact moment, Principal Whitaker's phone at Northbridge exploded with a system-wide alert. Mr. Malcolm Kingsley has requested an immediate assembly of all students and faculty in the schoolyard. At Northbridge, the emergency bell rang out like a siren. In the courtyard, Travis Monroe was fixing his hair in the reflection of his phone when a booming announcement echoed across the campus. Student Jaylen Brooks, you are invited to return to school. Someone is here to demand justice on your behalf. The courtyard fell into stunned silence. Back at his home, Jaylen stood in the yard, heart racing, eyes glistening. For the first time in his life, someone with power had chosen to stand with him. Publicly, the Northbridge High schoolyard had never been this packed. Students, teachers, even security staff were all present, standing silently, not because of Principal Whitaker, but because the name Malcolm Kingsley had just been spoken over the loudspeakers. At the far end of the courtyard, Travis Monroe, who just yesterday strutted through campus like a king, was now shrinking behind his group of friends, eyes darting nervously toward the main office building. And from that building, Kingsley stepped out, walking side by side with Jaylen Brooks and his family. Principal Whitaker stood stiffly in the center of the courtyard, his face as rigid as wax, his smile so forced it looked like smeared ink. "Mr. Kingsley," Whitaker said, trying to keep his voice steady, "your presence here is quite an honor for our school. However, I must say—" Kingsley raised his hand, cutting Whitaker off mid-sentence, no hesitation in his voice. "Save your breath, Whitaker," he said, his voice echoing through the courtyard. "I'm here to bring Jaylen Brooks back to this school and to expose who you really are." A wave of murmurs swept across the courtyard. Students turned to look at Jaylen, now standing tall, no fear in his eyes. "Schools are meant to nurture minds," Kingsley continued, "not to cultivate prejudice and hollow pride. You expelled an outstanding student simply because he's poor and his skin color doesn't match the rest. That's disgraceful." Whitaker's face flushed red, his lips trembling. I was only following standards." "Standards?" Kingsley smirked. "What kind of standards allow your students to call someone a black farm boy in the middle of your schoolyard?" All heads turned in unison toward Travis Monroe. He stared down at the ground, face paler than a blank apology form. "Mr. Whitaker," Kingsley stepped closer, his eyes cold as steel. "If you don't publicly apologize to Jaylen right now, I will personally withdraw the $5 million investment the Kingsley Foundation was prepared to make in this school. And trust me, after today, your name won't show up on a single school board in this state ever again." The air went thick. Students swallowed hard. Teachers exchanged uneasy glances. Then, in front of the entire school, Whitaker turned to Jaylen, voice shaking. "Jaylen Brooks, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Deeply wrong." Jaylen said nothing, but his eyes, steady, silent, strong, said everything. When Principal Whitaker bowed his head in apology before the whole school, time seemed to freeze. The students stood still, some turning away, not because they were offended, but because they had been silent for far too long. Jaylen Brooks looked him straight in the eye, not with anger, not with smugness, just the gaze of someone who had once been crushed, now standing firmly on his own 2 feet. But deep inside, Jaylen knew this wasn't just the end of one injustice. It was the beginning of something far more important. Malcolm Kingsley stepped beside Jaylen, his voice softer now. "Jaylen, you did something most people your age wouldn't dare. You stood up for yourself. But I have a proposition for you." Mr. Kingsley opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a professionally printed document. "The Future Voices Fellowship from the Kingsley Foundation," he announced. "A full scholarship, a program to train the next generation of leaders. And I want you to be the first. You'll leave Maple Hill, study at our Leadership Center in New York, and become the voice for thousands of young people who've been overlooked just like you." The entire schoolyard erupted in whispers. Students, teachers, even Travis Monroe looked up, stunned. Jaylen stood frozen, his eyes shifting from Kingsley to his parents standing in the distance. His mother, Angela, in tears, and his father, Carl, nodding proudly, his eyes gleaming with pride. Jaylen took a deep breath. "I know this is an opportunity most people only dream of," he said, his voice firm. "And I know I'll learn things that will help me change the world. But if I may, I want to do something first." He turned to face the crowd of students, his gaze lingering on the black and brown kids, the skinny ones, the ones who always sat in the back, eyes downcast. "I'm going to stay at Northbridge for one more year. Not because I'm afraid to leave, but because I know there are still so many voices here that haven't been heard. I want them to see that you can hold your head high, even if you're wearing a faded shirt and shoes with worn-out soles." Kingsley smiled. "You truly understand what I hoped you would." Jaylen continued, "Then I'll go, but I want to leave as someone who left behind something that matters. The real lesson today wasn't in any textbook. It was in the courage to confront, the dignity to forgive, and the strength to rise without stepping on anyone else." And everyone who witnessed that day, from Travis Monroe to Principal Whitaker, to every student who had once stayed silent, would never forget the name Jaylen Brooks. A week after that defining day, the atmosphere at Northbridge High had changed. The eyes that once glanced at Jaylen with doubt now greeted him with quiet nods as he passed by. Some students who used to stay silent in the face of injustice now spoke up when they saw someone being teased for their skin color or where they came from. Jaylen Brooks still wore the same old shirt, still walked in the same worn-out shoes. But the way he walked had changed. Steady, confident, and never again with his head down. That afternoon, after school, Jaylen stood alone in front of the school bulletin board, where a freshly posted flyer caught the breeze. Multicultural Day, organized by Jaylen Brooks and student volunteers. A younger girl approached him quietly, hugging her books close to her chest. "Jaylen," she said softly, her voice trembling, "thank you for doing that. I used to get teased because my parents are janitors." Jaylen knelt down slightly, offering a warm smile as he gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't ever need to be ashamed of your parents," he said. "They're good, hardworking people. You have every right to be proud." She beamed, her eyes lighting up as if, for the first time, she saw her reflection clearly, no longer distorted by judgment or shame. That night, Jaylen sat on the porch beside his familiar backpack. Moonlight spilled across the roof and bathed his face, now older, stronger, forged through everything he'd endured. Malcolm Kingsley would return after the school year to take him to New York, where the Leadership Scholarship Program would begin. His parents sat beside him in quiet pride. Angela gently squeezed his hand, while Carl patted him softly on the back. "You're not just representing our family anymore," his father said, voice rough with emotion. "You're carrying hope for a lot of people now." Jaylen nodded. He understood now more than ever. His story wasn't just his own. It was the voice of a generation that had been silenced too long. In life, we're often judged for things we can't control. Our skin color, our hometown, our background. But what defines us isn't where we come from. It's how we rise when we're pushed down. Jaylen Brooks is living proof of that. If you ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or invisible, remember this. You're not alone. Your true worth lives in who you are, in your resilience, your kindness, and your courage to keep going. Thank you for following the story. If it inspired you, don't forget to hit the like button, share to spread the message, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of the strength we all carry. We'll see you on the next journey, where truth, courage, and justice always find their voice.